Just welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining today in our second webinar in our webinar program series. I'm Rob Carrillo from my home organization, Trust IT, and I'm also from EOSC-hub, specifically looking after the communications and engagement work package. Just a couple of reminders before we begin. Firstly, this webinar is recorded and will be published online. The slides and recordings will be published in the EOSC-hub webinars page. The link is on the screen now. Also, please keep your questions up until the end. Questions will be conducted by raising your hand through the Zoom functionality. Now I'm going to start with a short introduction for EOSC-hub. So firstly, EOSC-hub basically aims to deliver the integration and management system of the EOSC, and it acts as a European entry point for all stakeholders. So basically, this is sort of encapsulated in the payoff or the tagline. So EOSC-hub, integrating and managing services for the European Open Science Cloud. We have a budget of over 30 million euros, and it's a humongous project with over 100 partners, 53 countries, and more than 150 staff involved. This is coordinated by EGI and is expected to last until March 2021 with the extension. At present, the project represents 20 digital infrastructures and is driven by EGI, EUDAT, and Indigo Data Cloud, jointly offering services, software, and data for advanced data-driven research and innovation. So a couple of the activity areas that EOSC-hub is carrying out can be summarized into four. Firstly, services, so specifically baseline services such as some of the more in-demand services such as storage and compute, application tools, data, training and consultancy. Another aspect is federated operations, and this includes lightweight certification of providers, SLA negotiation, customer relationship management. We also look at federation services. So for example, the portal and marketplace, which we shall look at today briefly, AAI, accounting, monitoring, and the help desk, as well as processes and policies, such as security regulations, compliance to standards, terms of use, and fair implementation guidelines. And all of this make up the hub, the EOSC-hub. So in the past few months and years, really, EOSC-hub has come up with a number of results, and we have summarized them into these key exploitable results. Today, in today's session, we're going to touch on 4 of those key exploitable results, namely the internal services of the EOSC-hub portfolio, EOSC Portal and the Marketplace, interoperability and integration guidelines, and rules of participation. Today's presentation will be provided by Gergely Sipos, who is the head of services, solutions, and support department at the EGI Foundation. Since 2018, he has been a key figure in the EOSC-hub project, leading the stakeholder engagement and research infrastructure piloting activities. He's also the main author of the EOSC-hub Integration Handbook for Service Providers, which was published just this May. And now with that, I'm handing over the floor to Gergely.
Thank you very much, Rob. Let me share my screen. I hope you can see the screen.
Yes.
Okay, so let me start. Thank you very much for joining the webinar today, which will cover this broad area of integrating services into the EOSC through the EOSC-hub project outcomes. In this presentation, which will take roughly a good half an hour, I will first talk about the big picture of what service integration means. Then I will talk about the different aspects of service integration, starting with registering services into the EOSC portal, integrating new services with the so-called core elements of EOSC the accounting, monitoring, authentication, authorization, and help desk. I will talk about how to integrate or interface services with other services that exist on the landscape, mostly to support different stages of data management cycle. I will close off with presenting what it means to align with the service management system, this concept of service management in EOSC, and then I will briefly talk about the future beyond the EOSC-hub project. So let me start with a big picture overview of what integration really means in EOSC. As we know, EOSC is a very rapidly changing and expanding landscape with various services operated by different stakeholders from both academia and industry. But roughly speaking, the European Open Science Cloud consists of a core layer, which is delivered by core service providers who operate the fundamental structure of EOSC, on which researcher-facing services can be hooked into or can be integrated into. And these researcher-facing services are then the ones which deliver infrastructure for scientists, innovators, and educators who are working in the broad topic of open science. Integration in EOSC basically concerns the registration of new services from providers in the researcher-facing layer of EOSC, and has three stages or has three aspects. The first aspect is the so-called onboarding, a very frequently used term if you go to different EOSC documentations. Onboarding basically means that registering a new service or a new data set in EOSC, which then can be accessed or can be made available for users for access, and are therefore somehow integrated with some core services in EOSC. And these core services are the ones which actually make your service or data visible to the users. So onboarding is the first step of integration, but there are other steps, such as integrating or interfacing your service with other services that also exist within the researcher-facing layer in order to deliver some combined results. For example, make your data set compatible with some already existing compute service, or make your compute service compatible with some container infrastructure, for example. And the third aspect of integration is what can be called alignment, aligning your service operational model with the service management system that is used by the rest of EOSC, and more precisely used by the core services of the EOSC landscape. So in this presentation today, I will go into details of these three areas: the onboarding of services, interfacing services, and aligning services with the rest of EOSC. Let me first start with a fundamental question: where to go to conduct these three different steps? The EOSC-hub project, in collaboration with other initiatives, more precisely OpenAir and eInfraCentral, put in place the EOSC Portal website, which was opened in November 2018. That EOSC Portal website since then seems to be the hub, the landing page for new providers to onboard into EOSC, to make their services visible and accessible for users. However, recently we see a large number of additional EOSC-related projects starting, and also many of those opened their project-specific service catalogs or service marketplaces. These different marketplaces at the moment exist separately. They are not integrated with this main EOSC portal, and there is no data transfer happening, at least not automatically, between the different marketplaces or different catalogs. Although in the long term, or even in the medium term, we are planning to integrate all these marketplaces and to create a network of marketplaces through which different aspects of services can be shared, we are not there yet. So at the moment, we have a separate EOSC Portal Marketplace with the largest number of services of all of these. And today, I will talk about how to perform this service integration through the EOSC Portal and through the core services that are connected to the EOSC Portal website. So let's start the first element of integration, which is the onboarding. onboarding is connecting your service into the EOSC portal in order to make it accessible for researchers and to optionally also to integrate it with additional core services. So let's zoom a bit into what core services we have that are facilitating the service onboarding. On one hand, we have the EOSC Portal and Marketplace, which is the web portal through which users can browse services, can find services of their relevance, and can access those services either directly or after some approval by the service operator. There are other core services, which you can see on the right side, particularly Federated User Authentication and Authorization Service, and Service Availability and Reliability Monitor, Service Usage Accounting System, and the Help Desk. Using the EOSC Portal and Marketplace and registering in those is the compulsory step. If you want to make your service visible in the EOSC Portal, then you need to complete this step. While integration with the other services, which are on the right side, are optional. Let me first talk about the integration with the portal and the marketplace, how to do that and what it actually means for you. Registration in the EOSC portal is basically a four-step process. As you can see here, it starts with filling a very short web form, an interest expression form, which you can find on the EOSC portal website. There is a dedicated section for providers, which includes this very lightweight short form. Once that form is filled, that's basically a very first cleaning or checking by the onboarding team that your service fits into the whole concept of EOSC and really aims to facilitate open science. Once we reach that, the onboarding team will send you a more detailed and longer questionnaire, which basically the one used to describe your service from different aspects, highlighting all the relevant details that are needed for a new user or new user community to understand what the service is for, what are the access conditions, what is the service level agreement they can get, acceptable use policy, and so on and so forth. The EOSC-hub team can support you in filling that form. In many cases, provides predefined templates that you can customize. For example, if you don't have a service level agreement yet, you can generate one using these templates. Once this longer form is filled, the team validates the input. In case any clarification is needed, they will come back to you. But once the form is complete, it will be entered into the EOSC service portfolio. This portfolio is then used, this database is used by the online service, the marketplace and the portal to render information about your service and to display it on the web. Depending on the access mode you choose for your service, they may activate the ordering feature in the marketplace. If your service is a fully open access service that doesn't need a user to request access, then it can be just simply added to the marketplace without the ordering feature. And once this is available, they will send it back to you for a final checking. And once you confirm that it's correctly displayed, then they will publish it in the live system. The so-called rules of participation is the fundamental criteria set that any service provider must meet. This criteria set is fairly simple. It says that your service should be there for open science. It should be either an online service or a human service such as training or consultancy in the topic of open science. A common mistake or a common question or recurring question is whether I can register my software or whether I can register my data set in EOSC directly as a service. The answer to that question is no, you cannot directly register a data set or a piece of software. However, there are data registries in EOSC and there are software registries in EOSC. You should consult with those data registries and software registries and find the most appropriate one for your purpose and register your data set or software in those, but not directly as a separate service per se. Your service should be targeting a research community. I would like to avoid registering, for example, the Dutch post office because scientists often use the post office to send, for example, samples around. We require you to fill the service description template, which is this long form that I mentioned. We require you to keep the data up to date, check it on a periodic basis, and we require that the service should be, at least that the basic information should be in English. We also require certain elements to be filled, such as there should be a privacy statement, there should be a term of use, and a service level agreement visible to the users. These are then displayed on the marketplace and the portal. Let me just highlight you this long form to give you an idea of the type of form you would receive as a service provider. You can even browse this. If you go to this bit.ly link, then you can find this form, which is a annotated spreadsheet. And in the spreadsheet, there are compulsory or required fields with red, and there are optional fields with yellow. All these red fields will turn into green once you fill them. And there is a guidance associated with every of the elements of the form. And there is also information on what the validation team will do once they receive this information for you. On this first screenshot, you can see the service provider related information, which is questions. Then on the second tab, you can see further information about the service itself. What is the endpoint, which is checked, which is a URL, what's the home language, the geographical availability of the service, for example. Then further description about the service, for example, a logo, a service tagline, those kind of marketing information that can be displayed and should be displayed in the EOSC portal. What kind of customers or users you expect to gain from the EOSC provisioning. Then further description of certain tags, certain research disciplines that this service can be relevant for, information on the technology readiness level, how mature the service is, what kind of standards, certifications, or other open source technologies the service is depending on, what other services it requires from the EOSC portfolio, and some information about the service management, for example, what is the service level agreement or agreements that you sign and provide for users, who is the service support contact, any security contact, a help desk if it exists, a user manual, any training material or tutorial relating to the service. Some further information about service management, such as policies, the terms of use. Then information about the access or ordering features. Is it a fully open service, or does it require the users to request access? If it requires access approvals, then who are the administrators who should be alerted when such an order request is received? At the end, there are some confidential information about what funding programs or funding bodies or projects are supporting the delivery of the service. These fields are not displayed publicly, but are kept in the service portfolio for completeness reason. Once all those details, at least the red cells, are collected, this spreadsheet is turned into the service portfolio entry and then displayed on the EOSC marketplace and portal. For example, this is a screenshot of one of the EGI services, the EGI notebook service, where you can see the high-level description of the service and two different options to use it. Whether you are an individual researcher, where you can have a certain capacity instance of the notebooks as an open access service, so you can just simply access that configuration, or if you need higher capacity, a more customized instance of the notebook service, then you need to order that, and then the technical delivery team will configure and set up a particular instance for you. On the right side, you can see that information about the service on its home web page, a help desk entry, user manual, tutorials, the service level agreements, terms of use, access policies, all the related information is available on the right side. And a user can also ask questions directly from the provider before deciding about any use of the service. So once that compulsory part of service integration or onboarding is completed, there are optional parts that you can move on to. And the first optional part is to integrate with additional core services of the EOSC-hub. The core services, as I mentioned briefly, there are Federated User Authentication and Authorization, Availability and Reliability Monitor, Usage Accounting, and the helpdesk system. These technical services are operated by EOSC-hub centrally, and your service can hook into these in order to gain further capabilities that can support your user in a better or more scalable way. In order to integrate with these services, you need some technical guidance. And there is a technical team who can provide you with that guidance. Typically, if you require such an integration, you can indicate that during the onboarding, and then this technical team will contact you and have a teleconference session with you in order to particularly advise you on the best use of these services and to identify integration options. Once those options are identified, you can work together on the integration itself, which may require some development effort on your side and definitely require some configuration on the provider on the EOSC-hub side. After the integration is validated, then this can be put into the live environment for the benefit of the users. So let me briefly talk one by one about these four core services that you may want to integrate with to better understand what are the reasons and what can be the benefits of integration. The first service is the Federated User Authentication and Authorization system, which basically can enable a single sign-on from the EOSC portal and the EOSC Marketplace to your service. The benefit of this is that your users can have a seamless user experience of transitioning their identities from their home institute or social logins to the EOSC portal and then further into your service, which can simplify and streamline the access for services that require the users to authenticate and authorize themselves. This whole system is interoperable with other community-based authorization and authentication systems. You can see a couple of these, such as from the DARIA research infrastructure, from the EduTeams system from Jean, from OpenAir Identity, and some other project-specific identity providers. Also, the user can choose all the academic providers or all the academic accounts that are federated in the so-called EduGain Federation of National Federations. You can find on my slides information about how to integrate with the EOSC Authentication and Authorization service. So on the next slides, you will see these links. You can find the slides on the webinar program website where you can find the links themselves. The second core service I would like to briefly cover is the monitoring system, which is basically help you as operator and can help your users see the health or the correct behavior of a service. The monitoring system can send test probes to your service on a periodic basis, and these test probes can test the correct behavior of your service from the perspective which is important to you or to your users. It's a pluggable system, so you can plug in and configure your service to be used by this monitoring system. And you can also customize the test probes that will be executed against your service. And you can also change the periodicity and the critical level of those tests. So here you can see a couple of screenshots that can be generated from this system in different dashboards. Here you can see the average availability and reliability of a service or a set of services over the different days. Here you can see, for example, the spread of the test results against a specific service, how many completed successfully, how many critical errors have been received, and how many warnings have been received. And on the third screenshot, you can see that different service endpoints are tested with different probes or different metric services, and then some of these resulted a critical error, some of these passed successfully. The monitoring service can automatically alert service operators or certain users in case of a critical error, for example, happens. So shortening the time to respond to problematic situations. The third service is the accounting service, which, as the name suggests, can collect and aggregate and display usage information about the service. Its scope is limited to kind of hardware consumption, and very specifically, it can measure the use of compute jobs, CPU cycles on a server. It can measure the number of virtual machines that have been instantiated, the number of processors of those virtual machines, the capacity consumed by those virtual machines. It can measure the storage space that is provided by providers and the storage space used by dataset providers on those core resources. On the right side, you can see two screenshots, the kind of reports or displays that the system can provide for you as a service provider. You can see historical use, for example, of your resource, or you can see, for example, a spread of different communities, how they share the capacity of your resource in a given period of time. If you wish to integrate your service into the accounting system, then basically it's a three-step process. First, in the central accounting system, you need to register your service endpoint. Then you need to install the necessary parsers or data generators or data collectors at your site. These data collectors will pick up the accounting data from your site and will then transfer it to the central system, which you can configure whether you want to route that data directly to the central system, or maybe you want to set up your own network and local collector first, receiving data from multiple service endpoints, and then you want to send further an aggregated result to the central accounting. And the last core service I want to cover is the help desk. The help desk is a ticketing system which we, EOSC-hub, can configure for you in case you don't have a help desk, but you would like to provide a support channel for your users where they can raise any sort of question or can raise any sort of issue concerning your service. The ticketing system can support different hierarchical models, and these hierarchies are displayed here. This is the user view, this right side and top image on the right side. Here, as a user, you can describe the question or issue about which you want to submit a ticket, and you can choose a support unit, basically a team who should receive this ticket. Either you can allocate it to a specific team, or if you don't specify a team, then the first level support team responsible for ticket dispatching will choose a ticket wasn't assigned to the right team, finding the right experts for you. So as I said, we can configure this system for you, and then as a provider, you can then see the tickets that have been assigned to your support unit, and you can react to each ticket individually, which will generate email notification to the user who opened the ticket and also to other members of your support team, so you can also synchronize the ticket resolution inside your team. Let me move on to the second aspect of service integration, which is the interfacing your service with other services of the researcher-facing service layer. There is a growing list of services in the EOSC portal. I just checked this morning, there are nearly 300 services now in the EOSC portal, and basically your service could interface with any of those, either through different APIs or some other mechanisms, for example, using the same data structure. The EOSC-hub project from day one delivers a large number of services through the EOSC portal. On one hand, we provide so-called generic e-infrastructure services, which are contributed by the EGI, Compute Federation, the EUDAT, Collaborative Data Infrastructure, and the Indigo Data Cloud system. Also, the project includes over 20 research infrastructure communities who deliver science discipline specific services in EOSC, and you may want to interface with some of those or use the data standards or compute standards that they use. I would like to talk a bit about the generic services because those are the ones that we see are more required for integration or found more useful for integration by new service providers. Plus, of course, there is a growing number of non-EOSC-hub services in EOSC portal, which you can also study yourself when you sign up or onboard your service, and you may find something that you may want to interface your service with. So let me talk about these generic services that are contributed by EOSC-hub. And let me show them through this so-called virtual research cycle, which shows the typical cycle of a researcher working in an online or digital environment, where first he or she would like to discover and reuse existing data or existing compute or analysis services. That researcher can do that, for example, using the B2Find data catalog, can do that using the marketplace, which is a catalog of services, then use those identified data analytics services or scientific workload management services or orchestration services in order to parse his or her own data or cross-correlate that data with the other data that was discovered in step one. Use different large-scale compute systems, high-throughput computing or cloud computing systems together with different orchestrators or Jupyter notebooks to perform the analysis. Then select the final results, save those final results into a long-term archive using, for example, B2Hand or B2Safe or some trusted repository, and share those results with the broader scientific community through some of the deposition and sharing services that are available. So even if we look at the EOSC-hub portfolio, we can see that there is a variety of services that may be relevant for your service. You may want to use those in order to scale up your computing, in order to bring in some new features into your research workflow or your users' research workflows. Choosing the best one can be hard, and that's why the EOSC-hub project operates also an advisory team that you can contact through the help desk in order to ask for advice on which are the most suitable services for integration in your case. And they can provide you a very specific and customized advice to choose and to integrate with the best service. In the EOSC-hub project, we are using many of these research data facilitation services together with large-scale research infrastructures. So I just listed here 4 of those: the Elixir, the ITER Fusion Science, 2 communities from the marine sciences, and the EOSC-3D atmospheric science community, who are facing different types of challenges, all related to the large-scale computing, data sharing, application sharing, and user authentication. And in the past 2.5 years, they identified relevant services from the EOSC-hub portfolio and started the integration of those. We are getting towards the end of the project, so within the next 2 months, these integrated services will eventually end up into a complete setups or validations by those research infrastructures, and then will feed into this research infrastructure landscape and research infrastructure portfolio that they operate beyond the project. If you are interested in how these research infrastructure, as well as other 4 integrate services from EOSC-hub, then I suggest you to take a look at this D8.1 deliverable, which provides a snapshot of these integrations, and the follow-up and final deliverable of this will be available publicly in 2 months from now. The third aspect of integration of services is the alignment with the IT service management system of EOSC. And to explain this part, let me take one step back and talk a bit about what is IT service management in general. One of the recurring problems or issues that many organizations faces when joining EOSC is they realize that from now on they should act as service providers, although very often they used to be, or they are, research centers primarily. So they are not experts on service delivery. Their processes, their documentations are not organized neatly in order to meet the new challenge of professional service delivery. IT service management is a practice that an institute can adopt in order to become a service provider. Why it is important? Statistics from Gartner shows that many of the service outages, service unavailabilities, are because people are not aware of how they should react to certain situations, such as to outage in the service, malfunctioning, a new service request coming in, resource allocation processes, and so on and so forth. The technology and environment and hardware failures is just accounting for 20% of the outages. So that's why focusing on this 80% is so important, making sure that your team, who are the service delivery staff, are aware of their responsibilities and have very clear guidance on what to do when a new service request comes in, when a new user comes in, when a new service level agreement should be signed, when service planning should happen, where capacity planning should happen, and so on and so forth. There are different IT service management standards of practices. In EOSC-hub, we adopted the FITSM, which is an open, a free, and a very pragmatic IT service management standard. You can find a full standard on this website, and you can access all the documentation and support material for free. But basically, the FITSM is a requirements-based standard. What it means is that it specifies 85 requirements that you as a service provider should meet, should fulfill, in order to qualify as FITSM compliant. These 85 requirements are split into 2 categories. One is, the first category is so-called the general requirements. It talks about general responsibilities and commitment on implementing a service level management or service management. And there are process-specific requirements, where there are 14 processes in FITSM. And just to give you examples, there is a service portfolio management process, talking about how to organize your service portfolio, describe your service portfolio. A service level management process, talking about how to plan service delivery towards your customers. There is an incident management, how to handle incident situations. Change management, how to update your service, who to alert on an update, how to announce downtimes, for example, how to plan changes, capacity management, and so on and so forth. So there are 14 of those. And there are a number of requirements defined for each of these 14 processes. And just to give you 2 examples, 2 of the processes that are most likely to be needed by any provider. One is the service portfolio management, which has 4 requirements in FITSM. One is that you as a service provider should have a service portfolio. Whether it's a text file, it's a database, it's an Excel spreadsheet, or it's a Word document, doesn't matter. It can be even a piece of paper, but it should be a service portfolio that you manage, where your services are described and you are aware of what service is in your portfolio, what isn't. You should have a process to transition services enter them into the portfolio or retire them from the portfolio. You should have plans on how or based on what criteria you can add the new entry into the portfolio. And you should have a clear understanding of who is responsible for the delivery of each of the services in your portfolio. So these are the criteria, but how you meet those criteria is up to you. It's specific to your circumstances, to your situation, and you can meet the standard or you can meet these requirements in very diverse ways. Another process that you probably need to implement first is service level management, which talks about maintenance of a service catalog. A service catalog is basically the public facing section of the portfolio. A catalog includes those services that are live, those services that you want to offer publicly to your customers. There may be services still in early development, you don't want to expose them. There are services that have been retired, you don't want to expose them. The catalog is the live subset of your portfolio. For this live service subset, you need to have an understanding on what conditions you can offer them. What is the SLA? Is it a single SLA for every customer, or you can support customer-specific SLAs? You should review those SLAs with your customers on a periodic basis. You should check how you meet your SLAs. Are you able to deliver the quality that you promised in the SLA? Are you on target for the SLAs? Are you able to meet the SLAs based on your suppliers who are maybe providing some components into your service that you encapsulate into your service? What agreements you have with those suppliers? So these are the topics that you should think typically first before registering as a service provider in EOSC or acting as a service provider in general. So FITASM provides you these requirements that can be basically a checklist for you that you can test how good you are. And on the FITASM website, you can find self-assessment tests, basically a tick box based list where you can check how well you meet the 85 requirements. So how do we offer or use FITASM through EOSC-hub? On one hand, the core services that I explained earlier, the marketplace, the portal, the accounting, the monitoring, and so on and so forth, are all using this FITASM approach to meet the demand and to be professionally delivered. Second, by running the onboarding and by structuring the onboarding process and the onboarding form, we actually enforce some of the FITASM requirements on the EOSC providers. In the onboarding form that I showed you earlier, we ask about what SLAs you can offer, what are the access conditions, who are your target customers. Some aspects are covered in the onboarding form that are actually also requirement in the FITASM standard. So by being able to fill the onboarding form, you are actually meeting some of the requirements from FITASM. Third, if you integrate with some of the core services, then you can implement additional requirements or can implement them more easily from FITASM. For example, if you use the help desk, then immediately it's very easy to define how you will react to incidents or service requests, because those will reach you through the help desk. You can very easily define who will be responsible for responding them. You can measure, for example, the response times and so on and so forth. If you integrate with the accounting system, then you can better plan the service availability and continuity. You will see when you have downtimes, when you are unavailable. You can measure percentages over time, which can be used to also measure how well you meet the promises you made in the SLAs. And last, the project offers also training and consultancy about FITASM. So if you keep an eye on the website, then you can hear about the upcoming FITASM courses. Since July this year, due to the COVID situation, we started to deliver the introductory level FITASM course online, and we can provide also personalized consultancy for institutes who want to adopt FITASM within their own service portfolio. So as a summary of the integration aspects that I covered three aspects of integration. One, the onboarding, which consists of two subparts. The compulsory part is registering your service in the marketplace, filling that form that you will be sent. The optional part is integration with technical services responsible for single sign-on, authentication, authorization, accounting, monitoring, and help desk. The second aspect was interfacing your service with other services of the portfolio, which is a very broad area. It's very specific based on what service you want to interface with. It can be using the same data structure, using the same standards, using the certain APIs. And the third was alignment with the service management system, where I talked about the FITSM standard, what it means, and how to implement it by meeting some of the 85 requirements that are in FITSM. These three aspects that I talked about are described in a recently published book or handbook, which you can find on Zenodo at this link. So that's a kind of guidebook that I recommend for you to read if you want to bring your service into the EOSC through EOSC-hub. And let me close the webinar with a few words on future outlook. As Rob said earlier, EOSC-hub will finish at the end of March next year, but there are a number of initiatives that will take over many of the responsibilities that EOSC-hub has now, and many of the services that I talked about today. First, the EOSC Enhance project, which started this year and will run for the next 2 years. That's basically the EOSC Portal provider and the developer project. It carries forward the EOSC Portal and integrates new features into the portal. One of these new features is now in beta test mode. It's a self-service portal for providers where they can set up their profile, they can fill their service description, and then they can manage this data themselves. So lowering the human work that's needed to publish new services in the portfolio. You can try this beta portal and you can play around with the data because it will be erased before the live system will be put online. The second aspect that's happening in EOSC Enhance is interfacing the EOSC portal with other catalogs and other marketplaces that are coming online in the EOSC landscape. I mentioned in the beginning that there is a growing number of EOSC projects that set up their own catalogs and marketplaces. And now there is discussion on how to interface these marketplaces together in order to be able to federate content from across all of these in order to continue to serve as the landing page of EOSC with as much information federated together as possible. Meanwhile, enabling customized views, customized richness of data at the different regional or thematic catalogs. The third aspect is an architecture working group, which has been set up by the EOSC Executive Board. This architecture working group is working on the definition and future specification of EOSC core services, taking into consideration what has been achieved by EOSC-hub, those core services that I explained. It will make recommendation on data standards, on making data more visible and more available in EOSC, and it will provide additional standards and best practices for providers. This working group will deliver the outcomes at the end of this year. And the last point I would like to make is that the EOSC Association, a new legal entity, has been launched in July this year, which will take over many of the responsibilities of managing EOSC. And a new project will start from 2021, which will take over many of the responsibilities on operating the EOSC core services and engaging with different stakeholders on the landscape. So thank you for your attention. The last link I would like to point to is this recently set up landing page of documentations. That's where we collect all the documentation that can be relevant for EOSC service providers. So everything I talk today is available there in different documents, but in a structured manner. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Gergely. It seems we're a bit pressed on time for some questions. Please raise your hand with the raise your hand function if you want to ask a question. First question we have is from Kurt Stockinger. I am now putting you on unmute. You may now unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello, so my name is Kurt Stockinger. I'm the project leader of the project called iNode, Intelligent Open Data Exploration. And my question is from your presentation, which I liked it, but it was a bit abstract. So I didn't really quite understand what I can do now. So let's say the services that we built basically a better search engine, right? So we have astrophysics data, we have biology data, and now we have a link where you can, on a web interface, and you can query our data. So what do I now do to get it into EOSC-hub? Does it just mean I register and then I basically, the link that we have, you know, our URL is then registered in there, or what does it mean?
Exactly. You should go to this.
No, I don't want to talk now the details about filling out 33,000 forms, but my question is, what does it mean? So let's say we have basically a URL where you can call our services. You can search, let's say, a biology database in natural language, and it translated to SQL. So does it? I just give you our URL, and it's part of the.
It will have in the EOSC portal. You will have a profile like this. If you still see my screen, you will have a profile like this, describing your service, describing what kind of data you can find there. And if it's an open access database, so I don't need to authenticate or log in or anything, then this pointer here, access the service, will take you or take the user to your database. If your service requires the user to request access or to log in, then it would be a different button, basically request access. And that's it. That's the minimal level of integration.
Okay, yeah. So now the problem is that, so our project, we're about a year in the game. In another year we will have something, but then EOSC-hub is not there anymore. So basically, does it make sense to integrate it or to wait for the EOSC-hub too? Or what do I do now?
No,
I'm not ready yet. I would be ready in a year. What do I do?
So this marketplace and basically this process of onboarding will not change. And all this catalog will be carried forward by this new project that will start next year. So don't worry about that. Go ahead and register whenever you are available. Those who registered in the past also shouldn't worry about disappearance. There is a continuity of this.
And I also wouldn't need to do a complicated AI integration. I just want to have.
No, you don't have to.
Okay,
that's an option. If you see a value in that, that's an option. If you don't see the value, don't do it.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. This answered all my questions. Good.
Thank you very much, Kurt. Now we have a question from Lizana, who's asking, this SDT is going to be updated with the two templates by EOSC resource and provider profile delivered from EOSC Enhanced project, which has the main goal of increasing the functionalities of EOSC. So I think in general, the question is just whether the SDT will be updated.
Yes, it's in continuous move, and I had a disclaimer here. On this slide, there was a disclaimer that this so-called rules of participation is as it is today, but this is continuously evolving, not only by EOSC-hub, but there are other projects and executive board involved and everything. This improvement will bring benefits only and shouldn't be also a reason to delay onboarding. So don't wait for the new version, because there will be always a new version. These are incremental improvements that just brings benefit.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Gergely. Now I am recognizing Kostas Koumantaros. You may now speak.
Hi all, I just wanted to say that as far as I know, as I'm involved in the, let's say, technical part of the portfolios in both in EOSC and has in EOSC-hub, the process is now in, say, in the rapid changing, importing and migrating everything we have in the previous SCTs into portfolios 3.0, which is the new thing, the new, let's say, STTs with much more information. And as far as I know, by the let's say by the end of October, they will switch to using Profiles 3.0. That doesn't mean they've stopped importing new, let's say, services in this, but they are a bit overloaded with the migration to the new things.
Right, exactly. Basically, in this new profile, the main difference will be that the provider information will be much more split from the service description. So it will be easier for a provider to bring in multiple services because the provider profile has to be described only once, and then only the service specific details need to be described separately for each of the services.
To extend that, also another major difference is that the new say templates describe resources in general, not just services,
right?
Which makes it a bit more generic, and it's able to import more things than services.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we don't have much time, but thank you very much for the additional information, Costas. We have a question from Genevieve Romier, who asked this question during the portion on the help desk. She's asking, who is doing the first level of support, which is redistributing the non-assigned tickets to the right support team?
Who is there? There is a dedicated team from the EOSC-hub project. Don't ask me which task it is, but there is dedicated persons now paid from EOSC-hub, and this Infra-EOS 03 project will cover this from 2021. So this first level support will remain.
Okay, and the last question from Alessandro Mosca. Does the procedure you explained today also hold for projects like eNode, for instance, which are intrinsically meant to design and implement new generic or cross-disciplinary services for the sake of the EOSC-hub users, or are there other steps to follow?
No, that applies to those projects as well.
Okay. All right.
But I would advise you that, because typically projects want to bring in more than one service, I would advise you to have a call with us. So fill out this form, fill out this short form, but write into that form that I'm a project and I'm expecting to bring in, I don't know, 10 or 15 services. And I would like to better understand the process for this and the best approach for each of these services. So can I have a telco with you? Because typically it's much more simpler and much more simpler if you do that way than if you fill out this form 15 times for each of the separate services.
Indeed. Excellent. So, okay, very well. Alessandro, thanks you. And I'm afraid that's all the time we have for the questions today. Thank you very much, everyone, for your interest and for joining us in today's webinar. Just a reminder that all the slides and the recording from today will be available maximum by tomorrow in the webinars page of the EOSC-hub website. If you have any additional questions, feel free to send some questions to us via email. Anyways,
I put here the help desk entry, so you can ask questions in the help desk. I think that's the most effective one. Also, there is this web form on the EOSC-hub website.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Okay, I suppose with that, we can close the webinar. Thank you very much, everyone, and see you again in another webinar in about 2 weeks, more or less. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.